Kissel from Kessel. Sorry. From Com Resource. We're so gracious enough to host our Agile Lunchbox meeting today. And I'm going to have Scott come and say a few words before our presentation gets started. Thank you all very much for coming.
Hey guys, Scott Cable, Technical Recruiter here at Com Resource, Steve Kissel. I just wanted to welcome everybody out today. Glad you guys can make it. Thanks to Janova and EdgeCase for coming. I know you guys are accustomed to the CLC facility, but hopefully the pizza and accommodations have been good to you guys so far. We're an IT solutions provider here. Prior to showing up today, had anybody heard of us here at Com Resource, EMG and Janova? Okay, so a few of you guys. We've been around for about 20 years. We have 4 divisions or 4 lines of business. We're headquartered here in this facility. Behind you here in this corner, we have folks in from Hitachi Data Systems that are doing training in our Hitachi lab. So that's one of our areas of focus in storage solutions. We have an infrastructure services team here in the back. We do software integration with Sterling Commerce's Gentry Integration Suite, and then also with Oracle's Fusion middleware as well. And then last but not least, where I typically come in, Steve and the rest of the recruiting team here in the back is our professional services group. And that's where we've had our most significant growth over the last few years. And if you guys have a chance to hang out afterwards and say hello, please do, even if you're not actively supporting the market. I think we've got a pretty unique environment here, and we'd love to meet you guys. So welcome. Thanks again.
Alright, well, my name is Brian Lisenhoff. I'm the Director of Product Management at Janova, and I want to thank all of you for coming out here and listening to this story that we're about to tell. I'm going to try to not make it more of a product spiel than really what we've done here and how we created it with partnership through EdgeCase. So any product questions, anything like that, table that for the end of the presentation, and our wonderful salesperson, Brian Steele, back there will be more than happy to accommodate that kind of stuff. So what I want to start with here is really just give you really a high level of, well, our presenters as well. I should probably let Monica introduce you. I have a tendency to just walk through these things, so I apologize. But Monica, please introduce yourself here.
I'm Monica McJunkin with EdgeCase. I'm essentially the lead project manager. We're not big on titles. I've been with EdgeCase for a little under 3 years, and we're located in near Powell off of 315.
Okay. So today what we're going to really cover is sort of the history of Janova and where we came from, and really how the idea was born, and then really jump into I think what you guys all want to hear about is why we chose Agile, what the Agile partnership with EdgeCase looked like, how it started and how it really flourished over the year and a half now that we've been with EdgeCase here. So like I said, I'll keep the history brief to let you know where Janova came from, but really where it came from is really why we chose Agile and why we partnered with EdgeCase for this endeavor here. So Janova actually started as our consultants back in 2002. At that time, Jeff, myself, and Kelly really hadn't decided where we wanted to take this company or what we wanted this company to be. And so we chose ARC as our means to say, we're going to ARC to the next big thing. We don't know what that next big thing is, but we know we're proficient in PMOs, in software implementations, and business analysis, and all of those services. So we'll start with that, and when we find our end goal here, we'll figure it out, and we'll rebrand ourselves, and ultimately that's where we came out with Janova. So over these last 8 years, as I said, we were doing a lot of PMO and service implementations, and we started seeing trends in the companies that we were working with that were utilizing traditional waterfall methodologies. Projects were taking a long time, 6, 9, 2 years worth of implementations to get things done. They were struggling with, how do we evolve with the ever-changing requirements that come down from a sponsor, as well as the ever-changing requirements that developers, while they never do that, make changes on their own to the requirement, but don't let anybody know that change has been made. So through these years, we sort of documented these things and watched what was happening and sort of found those pain points and really started to figure out what can we do to help facilitate some of these issues. And about 3 years ago, we funded an open source project called Watercraft. And what that did is took sort of the best of breeds here with the open source world, with Cucumber and Taza and all of those Eclipse IDEs that you can use, and sort of put together a framework of how testing should be. What do we need? How do you handle requirements? How do you work with development? How do you work with the analysts? And through that, really over Christmas of 2008 was really when Jeff and I sort of had the aha moment. We know where we want to take this, and we know what we want to be from a software standpoint. And at that time, I was sort of out working at Nationwide, and I was the project manager on delivering the first iPhone app out at Nationwide. I delivered the crash kit that came out in April of 2009, and that was one of the first projects in corporate internet that had utilized the Agile methodology. They were traditionally a waterfall group over there, and over those few months, we sort of switched the dynamic in that group to really talk about the iterations and how things need to evolve, and how you need to have multiple releases on things and not be tied to certain dates when these things come out. So it was at that time that I came back to Janova, and during that time we worked with Jason Malicki and his group out there to rebrand ourselves as a software company. We said, this is it. We're done with consulting. We're going to be a software company, and we're jumping in feet first. And that's where we are today. So that's really sort of the quick, brief history of Janova and where we've been and where we've come from. So what we found through these years, and I'm going to briefly go through these because these will help address some of the things we have when we get to the Agile part of this, is that we found there's a lot of serious problems with traditional testing. Most of those starting to be with, technical knowledge is required for most testing solutions out there. Take a look at what's up here. Hardware compatibility issues. Usually these are local installs or installs that require a lot of updates to that system, and people are hardware constrained, resource constrained, as well as cost constrained on these things to keep these things up to date moving forward. So, as well as these things were serial. When you install this thing on one system, most of the time, most of the companies we were working with, we were finding they were executing these tests serially. And that chews up a lot of bandwidth and a lot of resources on one system for what was going on here. And so, what we saw, and these were really the 5 high-level needs that we found here with why the idea was born, was QA became this bottleneck. Requirements in a traditional waterfall project were started 9 months before development even was kicked off. And during those changes, we would hand over one document to development. Development would run with that document, either adhere to that document or not adhere to that document. And so what we kept seeing was, how can we bring this group together? How can we get this communication brought to the front and keep it from being that bottleneck at the end? Because again, if any projects that you guys have ever been involved in, what were the comments? Well, QA is not letting us release this because they haven't tested it. They don't know what we're going after. They don't know what we're doing. And so then again, it all came down to, are we willing to release without testing? Are we willing to release, with this minimal scope creep? And so we decided, what's the big thing that's going to fix this? A web-based tool. Again, you take a look at most of the heavy hitters out there and the big guys, they're all client-based. You have to install that onto a system, and you have to keep them updated. You have to keep them in sync. You have to keep them, across the board, consistent with the environments that you're looking at. And so we decided to make this a web-based tool. Standardized testing techniques drove up those infrastructure costs. One group may be using the same tool, but we may be using different types of test scripts or different processes around that. And again, it all depended on the project and how you got through it, and whether or not the project manager that you were working with decided this was the right way to do it versus this way that some other project manager had. And so again, we also believe that we need to eliminate the need for business analysts to know the code, because again, when it got to QA at the end, QA was trying to verify these requirements with the business analysts, showing them their test scripts, and the BA would throw his hands up and say, I don't understand what you've written here in the script, I don't speak code. And so we tried to eliminate the need for business analysts to understand testing scripts. And so that's really how the idea was born for Janova here. So, which we look at here, and the slide is called Why Agile, but it really should be the decision, I think, in my mind, of why we went Agile versus traditional project management methodologies. And the reason was we were starting small. We were a company of 8 to 10 people at that time. Well, we didn't have the resources or the time to install a large PMO that had all the rigors and the controls and all of the processes that most people have to abide by when it comes to those types of methodologies here. So we started small. We started with actual physical cards on the wall. We bought cork boards. We laid out a space in the office, which at the time was probably no bigger than this area right here. And we would put the boards up on the wall, and we would have our iterations planned out with physical cards on the wall, and every morning we'd have our stand-ups and walk in and be able to see what's happening here. Now again, through our growth, we've had to evolve a little bit from actual cards on the wall, and we utilize pivotal tracker right now. But, you know, what this did, and again, I'm not telling you guys anything you haven't already heard before, was that it allowed us to have a quick change of focus. Being 8 to 10 people, you know, we had to be able to jump up and say, oh my gosh, there's this deal coming up over here. We need to put together these marketing initiatives, and we need to make sure the developments of whatever changes that we need to do. Oh, and HR needs to be able to hire and recruit the people that we need to fill these positions that we're going on. So it allowed the entire company to get together and communicate about what was going on in the entire office and the entire departments that were involved with Janova.
So you had the entire company's activities on those cards?
Absolutely. We started with, and I'll get to it later, so I won't jump to it, but currently today, every department in Janova has their own pivotal project which utilizes their own cards and their own system for prioritization and iteration planning and all that stuff, as well as we have implemented the Scrum of Scrums in Janova here to discuss what's going on with every department in the company to see what's happening. So, and again, we realized traditional methodology which just wasn't going to work for us. So we needed to evolve quickly. We needed to move out of the state of being a consulting group to a software group very quickly, and Agile was going to allow us to do that. So, and the last two, you know, again, test-driven development ultimately led to our product design here is where we're thinking. So, as he did already, feel free to interrupt. It's not going to bother Monica or I. It's really, you know, okay, so if you have a question or a comment or something you want more clarification on, please speak up and ask a question. The Agile Partnership, well, I love to tell this story because it really is, you know, one of those aha moments at the group and at the company itself in terms of what we started with and where we did. And so as I talked about, we had built the Watercraft framework and we're looking for a partner that understands the Ruby knowledge and the integrations associated with a product design that was frankly something we had never seen before. And so what we did is we initially contracted out to talk to a couple of local and non-local companies that were understood Ruby, understood the development process, understood Agile, and could incorporate their methods into ours. And we had a meeting with Joe O'Brien, the founder of EdgeCase. One of the founders of EdgeCase. And like I said, I joke about this, but it really was the first moment when we sat there and we laid out the vision of where we wanted to be with Janova. We said, we want a tool that is web-based, that executes tests in the cloud, that allows analysts, both business and quality, to be able to communicate together, to understand the life cycle of a requirement from beginning to end. And oh, by the way, we want this thing to be scalable, expandable, and easy to use. And Joe looked at us across the table and he said, yeah, we can do that. And again, I paused and I looked at Joe and I said, Joe, I don't think you quite get what we want to do here. We want to take this local system that we have here on these desktops, install it on a server. I want it to be able to grow and move based on the demands at the time that want to go on. I want these tests executing on different servers, coming back and reporting results and integrations all over the place. And I looked at him and I said, do you now get what I'm trying to do here? And he goes, yeah, we can do that. I said, okay, prove it. And we commissioned EdgeCase for a 2-week proof of concept, an Agile iteration, to show me that you can really do this. And at the end of that 2 weeks, we had a working model with Janova after that iteration. Now it's evolved and we'll get into all that stuff, but he proved to me in 2 weeks that he could prove out and get this thing working out in the cloud, and we had a real product discussion. And as Jason can allude here to, when we made this decision, this was a 2012-2013 initiative. that we were looking at for a web-based solution. We shifted gears. We stopped what we were doing, changed direction, and said we're going to wait for these 8 months. We're going to build it. We're going to make it now. And so our dynamic shifted greatly, and we wouldn't have been able to do that without waiting for the
I remember those early conversations when we started looking at, and we started sizing it in those first couple weeks. We said, oh my gosh, we could have that. We could have that this year. We have to change all our marketing plans because we could have that this year.
That can include all the conversations we had about changing everything that we did, from strategy to advertising to web initiatives, everything. And that, again, wouldn't have been possible had we not implemented Agile across the board, that Zach could walk in on the day and stand up and hear me say, oh, by the way, Zach, we're having this done in August. You should probably get the website working for that.
So I just want to take a minute to talk about EdgeCase. As Brian said, Joe O'Brien's one of the co-founders, so is Ken Barker. We're about 5 years old here in Columbus, but with clients all over the country. We are definitely an Agile shop. We're not adamant about being XP or Lean or any label like that. But what we use is kind of an XP and TDD environment. Always test driven. Jim Wyrick in our Cincinnati office has a big green bat, and if your tests aren't being written first, and if your tests aren't passing, he will take that green bat on you. Fortunately, he's in the Cincinnati office, so he can't come after us and love us too much. Big on that, big on pairing. Like people who know XP would be familiar with. We pair most of the time. There are occasional tasks where we don't, but pairing is the way we work. And we've set up the hardware in our office so that you have one computer and 2 keyboards and 2 mice, and pair developers can sit there and collaborate with a giant screen. And it's not a bit of like, well, we're on my laptop, let's do it this way. It's true pairing, very equal. And one of the things we really do is work closely with our clients as partners. We really consider ourselves partners. And with Janova, we really did get to partner. One of the things we like to do and we're able to do with Janova is help them transition to their own development team as well. So we mentored a couple of their developers. They come and sit in the office with us, learn from our developers, work on the processes together. That's what we consider really a big success story when a client is no longer a client and is on their own 2 feet. That's what we want to see in the end. So yeah, Brian mentioned our 2-week proof of concept. Project inception, I think, is one of the most challenging part of running any project, especially an Agile project, because you're not spending 6 months trying to lay out all your requirements and then figure out where to start. There also is this tendency, especially when developers are chomping at the bit, they want to write code, right? Day one, they want to write code, and they're saying, we're Agile, let's pick this piece and start writing this code. So the proof of concept is important. During that period, we also spent a lot of time in Janova offices with Brian and Jeff, working out the large-scale features, right? Just brainstorming together. What are the things that you want to get done? What is the order we'd like to do them in? Of course, that order shifted all the time, but what was our first picture? While we were doing that, 2 of our developers were on the side proving the concept, and they did that in just a few days, as Brian noted. It wasn't code that was kept. It was definitely a prototype that was like, hey, we can ping the server from here and hit this website from this app that we just wrote. And in Rails, we do most of our work in Ruby on Rails. In the Rails framework, it's very easy to get up a working prototype.
That was my first foray into what we learned to understand as spikes in the Agile world. That was my first foray into, hey, they're going to take 4 days and they're going to work on something. It's not going to provide any value potentially to the project, but they're going to go out and prove it out and see if they can do that. And if they do, then we're going to utilize that and build the cards accordingly.
Yeah, and as Brian mentioned, we use Pivotal quite heavily. We used an internal tool a long time ago, but it switched to Pivotal a couple years ago. Love using Pivotal Tracker. We call it Pivotal, that's really the name of the company. It's Tracker is the project. We all have visibility into it. Many of the Janova team members, the EdgeCase team members, we're all in there as equals making updates. So we would create cards, then right in there, that was our card wall. That was usually part of a weekly planning session. We were able to meet with them once a week in their offices face to face. discussing cards, creating them, adding the acceptance criteria in the cards. One of the greatest things about working with Janova, they're a QA-based kind of company, so they understand acceptance criteria. They understand the whole process of accepting the cards early, or testing early instead of at the end. Makes that whole process with Pivotal work very well. Estimation, also a group effort, sometimes done by the developers back in our office, sometimes done with the whole group in a weekly session. We play a little retro mode game, where you're like this, what's the size, and then discussion around it. Always a thing with estimation, you could spend all day trying to come up with the perfect estimate, and of course it's still in the end of the day just going to be an estimate. So we try to get that middle ground between understanding it enough to really give a good estimate and moving on, right, and not spending all day in estimates. We had the virtual daily stand-up basically over Skype, 9 a.m. every morning. When we didn't have our weekly planning session, we all checked in together and went over what did we do yesterday, what do we plan to do today, what we blocked on, all those different things. Iteration planning, I kind of just mentioned, we had the weekly meetings. Iterations were 2 weeks long. That's our typical model that we deliver every 2 weeks. And so sometimes those weekly meetings, were just larger discussions about architecture issues coming down the road, but certainly at least every 2 weeks, it was really planning for the next iteration. So we ran iterations that started on Monday, and our meetings were on Thursday. So on a Thursday, we were kind of, the second Thursday of iteration, you have a good feel for where you are in that iteration and planning the next one. Backlog group. Brian and I would spend some time, I can remember one particular meeting, I think in the EdgeCase office, where we were cleaning out the icebox. Has anyone here used Pivotal Tracker? So when ideas get entered, I only got one head nod, I think. When ideas get entered, we have an icebox area. And that's just a place where ideas go before they're prioritized. And an icebox can get pretty big with enhancement requests maybe coming from your test team.
Well, we missed the App Store one.
Yeah. Any idea that gets entered goes first in the icebox and then it gets prioritized. It is very easy. And with this tool, for stuff to sit in that icebox, and the icebox gets bigger and bigger. New things go to the top. Pretty soon you're scrolling way down looking at these ideas that are sort of in a graveyard. So not only does the backlog need to be grouped, which is the prioritized list of things you want to do next iteration, maybe the iteration after that, etc. You have to groom your icebox and say, hey, is this a duplicate? Is this an idea we really want to do and we should prioritize? Is this something to delete now?
And what Monica's touching on here is that we, through our iteration planning, we were within reason almost 8 iterations out in knowing what we could do. Almost 16 weeks worth of prioritized work that we had taken time to define the acceptance criteria. So to be able to have the time to go to this icebox and really look at these things and say, okay, should we really start talking about this? Let's lay out some of these big ticket roadmap items and pull them in.
Okay, so along with that, what quantifiable things were you looking at when you were prioritizing them? I mean, were there direct links to explicit business value, or how were you defining value when you were going through
Right.
that?
Well, we weren't doing in the cards, return on investment calculations or anything, but there were definite business needs.
Yeah, we had done some preliminary market strategy work to understand, what the niche players were, what were the big players, what were the big players offering, and how were they selling, and how are they tracking and trending, and where we wanted to fit in that. And that's really where we started laying out releases, big ticket thoughts of browser creations and data sets or things that we looked at and said, this is what the competition is offering. Let's do it, and let's lay it out here based on the needs that we can fit in this market. So we did, as a product owner, I mean, I was a very hands-on product owner, but as a product owner, I would take a step back with Jeff, and we would have those conversations offline with marketing and sales and say, okay guys, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are the needs? And through that, we would bring it back to the team and say, hey, let's lay out these releases and let's start prioritizing them.
Internally for development, and I say internally, but also with the Janova developers as they came on board, we would have team retrospectives, and we try to have those every 4 weeks. They didn't always happen every 4 weeks, but we had them throughout the project, identify the pain points, and figure out what's working well, and we want to make sure we keep doing what's not working well. We did many of those remotely. There were times when we couldn't all be in the same office, and there would be some EdgeCase people and some Janova people back at their office, even though we're close. And so to try to run a retrospective that way, we would do them online. Campfire, which we didn't kind of skipped over earlier. I don't know if anybody uses Campfire application for 37 Signals. It is a group chat, and it's persistent group chat. So you can go back in and view the transcripts later, even if you weren't logged in. And we use it quite heavily. We had a team room that we shared with Janova developers. Brian is wanting part of that extra noise in his day. But for the development team, because we had this extended development team, plus Tammy, who was doing most of the acceptance testing on the cards, she could pop in there, ask questions of our developers, get feedback, and vice versa. So we would run these retrospectives partially over Campfire and partially over online survey tools, because if you've ever run a retrospective, you know, one of the important things is to get everybody to talk and not just have the usual suspects talk and the quiet people not give their 2 cents. So a lot of times you have an in-person retrospective, everybody gets an index card and they write down, you know, whatever the question was, they write down their answer to the index cards, and then you can collect all the cards and post all the cards and discuss them. Everybody has equal chance to say their thoughts instead of saying, well, they stole my thought, I'm done. So we would do this as an online survey, so that everybody would post on their own, and then we'd share those results and discuss the results.
And most of the time, those results became action items that Monica would bring to myself and Jeff that we would then either add as chores or things that we needed to do within the backlog to make sure we were meeting their needs of what they wanted to
Because sometimes they were architectural things that we felt, oh, we're really worried about this piece, you know, the application, we need to fix this. Sometimes they were process. We had code branching and committing and merging process thing that it was like a constant ongoing team effort to make that as smooth as possible. Show and tells are just that. When we would be able to meet, that was a good time for us to be able to demonstrate whatever was accomplished.
Yeah, a lot of those times, those would be the good discussions that you get involved in, where it's, okay, that's not quite how I envisioned that, and you know, what do we need to work on to help give you guys more information on what we think we want out of this? Did we not define that criteria right for you guys to pick up that card and move forward with it? So what are we missing? What do we need to add moving forward with any future cards? So,
I think most of you talked about the rest of this.
yeah. Well, I'll pick up here and sort of give you, you know, the high-level milestones of our project here and show you really what got accomplished and when it got accomplished. As Monica talked about, we partnered in February with that first proof of concept there, and I believe probably about March 1 is really when I think we kicked it into high gear from a true project standpoint. In March, we, without having the product, said we're Janova and we are a software company. Started working on the website, started working on the application, and said no more consulting. We're done. In April, we applied for a provisional patent based solely on a design that we had here from that. I'm happy to say we've been awarded that provisional patent, and we are currently in the process of moving that forward to a full patent here from the application standpoint. In June 2010, so we started in March, April, June, we had a working beta. Every internal customer in Janova and some external, Maliki, Switchbox, all local firms here that we're partnering with Janova to help build our office here, we're working in a beta of Janova. You know, a true testament to what this project really did, that in 2 months, we had a functioning beta product that we could get out there and start testing and find out what's working and what's not. In July, the marketing website launched. In August, our support site launched. In September, the offering launched. In October, over 2,000 pre-registered trial users to the system. In February, based on data that we had found since September to January, relaunched the offering, dropped the price, added services, added functionality, because we had all of this data that the marketing group had mined through for months and months and months and said, you know what, we can drop this. We can give them more functionality because we designed this thing in a way that it's not going to eat into our costs. We can do this. And so in February, right before the Innovation Awards, we relaunched and sort of rebranded the website of what was going on in there. Lost to some medical device that cured cancer, so you know, I guess that's okay. But anyway, in June, you know, right now in June and July here, what we're looking for is we're integrating with business intelligence and reporting and workflow. We actually relaunched, again, with some Agile workflow in there. We have assignments, we have statuses. As she alluded to with Campfire, we are building a Scrum section that integrates into the application, allows for comments, questions, conversations, links, everything that's going on from that standpoint. And then ultimately here, probably sometime towards the end of July, early August, we've integrated with another Agile company called Good Data. They do business analytics, and so we will be embedding their product into the Janova application. Again, all of the things that you hear me talking about seem, in normal speak, big projects that I think would have taken months from inception to definition to development to everything. We would not have been able to accomplish this if we weren't structured the way we were to be able to shift and change our focus on a dime based on whatever I come up with. So that's really some of the high-level milestones.
Yeah, we certainly have some challenges along the way. You have challenges in any project. Velocity can be tough to measure, tough to get in a stable place. Of course, every time you estimate the work you're going to do, it is just an estimation. And there's always a tension between a business's very real need to plan and have a predictable outcome and predictable sort of march toward a release, and the inherent uncertainty in software, right? That's what we're really all about in Agile, aren't we? Plan as much as we can, recognize the uncertainty in the distance, and so it can be hard to say, well, velocity's low this time, but we had bugs that we fixed, or we had architectural issues that we went back and did, or an estimate wasn't what we should have had.
And that was really the balance that Jeff and I had to come to grips with. You know, again, we were coming from, again, traditional workflow management styles here, where it was, this thing's going live August 1. Well, how do you know it's going live August 1? Well, I threw a date out there, and that's what you guys are going to do. Well, what we did is we tried to let the team dictate when that release was. And so we really empowered that team to say, okay, guys, make this estimate right, because you are driving this delivery in September or October or November or what it is. And so there were struggles. There were times when we would come into these iteration planning meetings and we'd say, okay, guys, we're at one point at the end of the iteration. What's happening? And we'd have a discussion. And what we found is a lot of times, and I won't jump into it here, is that, you know, we had to decompose that card to do that. And so I'll let, you know, Monica jump in about breaking your card, but really it found out that we were doing 90% of the work. That was complete.
Sometimes a card just was too large or covered too much ground, and we had different types of pop-up windows that we wanted to be able to handle. And I don't know how much time we spent on that one where there may be 4 types of pop-up windows, and 3 you could do, and the 4th was just a bear. You know how it is, right? That last 10% takes 90% of the work. And, you know, at some point we had to move on and say, you know what, that part's coming out of this card, we're delivering the value we have, we're reprioritizing the other part, and move on. But we had to, you know, learn together when that was appropriate to do. You always have to go back to your partner and say, hey, we've got a challenge here, this isn't, you know, running it like clockwork like we hope, what should we do next? So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind always, is that communication, that daily communication on the status.
And I wish I could tell you guys that we came up with a formula that allows you to understand how to decompose a card the right way. We didn't. It really just comes from trial and error. It really is, you understand what's happening, you understand what the team means, you understand what the owner means, and so it really did take us a few months to really get to that part where our card would come up and we'd all go, yep, we agree with that. We appreciate what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and the estimation, I mean, that takes time for a team to come together and just always, you know, 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. I think we were doing the denominator scale, and we were doing a power of 2 scale. So kind of get a feel for a 2-point or 4-pointer. How does that really feel? It takes time for a team to get into a rhythm where you have enough previous things to compare to the level of difficulty to know that it's a 2 versus a 4. But a lot of uncertainty in the Janova project because we were really trailblazing here. This wasn't a system where somebody said, I want to keep track of inventory of these widgets over here. And it might be a complex system, there might be a lot of features, but you understand what's involved, and those problems have been solved before. A lot of the things we were doing in Janova were problems that had not been solved before, and an architecture that we were creating ourselves. So the uncertainty in this was much greater than the typical project, and you know, that meant plans had to keep changing. And as I think Brian had mentioned too, we started doing spikes. Sometimes we'd say, we have no idea how big this is. We can't estimate it. But if you give us a day or so to spike this and learn more about it, then we can come back with an estimate, or maybe a whole set of cards that are estimated, and then you can prioritize that. But at the same time, it's hard for the business owner to say, oh, okay, take 2 guys aside and spend the next 2 days not delivering any new features, but just putting your head down and doing some investigation. So,
to a point you asked about the priority of the business and what we were using to drive our releases and things like that. We would understand and start talking to the team and say, okay, we know this is going to happen. 3 or 4 iterations before it would happen is when we would have that spike. We would know ahead of time that we're earmarking this general area of when we think we want to deliver this thing. If that's going to happen, then they need to have this spike 6, 7, 8 iterations prior to that, so that we can at least start decomposing and building all of these parts and these requirements to make sure we're comfortable with that. And so we got to a point where it was, the planning of this is a lot more robust than what people, I think, want to give it credit.
Well, let's see. So that being said, how much involvement were you taking, or you actually using resources for the planning meetings? Or were you just doing that with the business? I mean, it sounds like the business agrees, but then at a certain point there's planning activities going along with the development. And you guys are calling that spike cards?
well, the spiking is when the developers go do technical investigation.
Okay, but up till then, are you involving any developers at all?
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and
Absolutely.
I mean, the developers were in the weekly planning sessions
Okay.
every week. There was a lot of whiteboarding
Oh, yeah.
between Jeff and the developers, and
Yeah, I guess the good and the bad of myself and Jeff being part of the product owner and very hands-on product owners, we have to hold the backgrounds. So we can monkey in the code when we need to. And so there would be a lot of weekly design discussions where it would be very detailed level planning of, I think we should do it this way. And so absolutely, I mean, there was very few times that there were decisions made that didn't involve the entire team for what was going on.
yeah, very heavy. I mean, it wasn't me as project manager sitting down with Jeff and Brian. It was, yeah, that Thursday meeting was everybody.
About 10, 12 people in that room.
Yeah, we
Every
started
Thursday.
crowding that room.
Pretty tough.
So as we talk about the benefits, I think we talked a little bit already about the show and tell. I mean, we'd even look at those sometimes during our stand-ups. There were times where we'd say, well, show me what you're talking about. Usually the stand-ups were properly kept very short, but sometimes we had sort of parking lot issues at the end. And we'd talk, well, what did you really mean about this? And we could show. Quickly shifting the team's focus is something that we probably did often, but you know how it is. Sometimes people take the word agile and then they turn it into chaos, right? And they tell the developer, stop what you're doing and do this instead, I changed my mind. And so we didn't have that going on. Things were pretty stable, you know, in the very short term, and you want things stable for the developers. You don't want task switching. But as Brian pointed out, when we relaunched at the beginning of this year with a new account structure for users, that was something that we're really able to turn around and you know, you reprioritize other features you're going to work on and say, you know what, we really need these account features because we want to relaunch in time for, I don't know what conference it was. The Innovation Awards to show up and have this unveiled at that time. And so we have this date to hit, so we're going to reprioritize this work, and the team can just say, okay, we're going to work on accounts instead. And we're able to do that. One thing we do at EdgeCase, one thing we believe very strongly in is a low cost of change. So even though you don't have maybe a 2-year plan for your development, you know, you don't have this rigid 2-year plan of these are my requirements and the order they're going to be in. As you're developing, the code you're working on, you know is going to get touched again. You're thinking about when things need to change. Is the next person, maybe there's a different person helping run the project. So nobody else, somebody's eyes. Maybe it's one of the Janova developers' eyes. So can they understand the code? Can they change the code easily? Is it designed well so that it is flexible? And so that was something we also try to do.
And along with that flexibility, we allowed every person on the team, which is again, the purpose of it, is to spawn those cards accordingly off of that. If you got to a point and you knew you had this, that icebox would get filled up with all kinds of development cards on, we know we have to come back and touch this. Let's earmark this here for a discussion on when we're going to come back and modify this based on an new requirements. So it was a true team effort in keeping that backlog in that icebox up to date with what we needed to do.
So I think these say some of the things we've said before, but using Pivotal, having the whole team in there, we always had that visibility stand-ups, we always had communication across the team. Of course, we're in the 21st century, but I do think it helps when you can have the face-to-face meetings and really get to know people. And I find it very important, that last point there, it's very important to me. You have to remember the process itself is agile. If you read it in a book and it says, this is your agile process, go use it, that doesn't mean that's the way it has to be all the time. Every project's different. Every partnership is different. So as you go through retrospectives, as you work along on a project, you find things that need to change in the process, and it's important that you do so. Yeah?
I have just a quick question. You said the whole team is in Pivotal. Do your product owners go in there as well and understand, since you don't have the card wall anymore? What do they use for their big and visible?
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody. It's Jeff and Brian were in there. Jeff would go in there and test cards, even though we had someone else doing some of the accepting. Some of the things he accepted, I mean, he was assigned to, but...
It was our system
Yeah.
of record. It was what we said was, okay, this is it. This is how we're going to stay with it. This is what we're going to use. We're not going to use anything else. We're not going to say, oh, it's in a Word document over here somewhere, or you got to go check this system. It's not in Pivotal. It's not part of the project. So.
Yeah, I would say that one of the challenges was, as they went into production, is that you also started running the Zendesk. And they start running Zendesk to, to log customer support issues or questions or enhancement requests. So there had to be a workflow of, okay, well, when do we prioritize that and move that into Pivotal? So.
And we had integrations from our ticketing system that allows us to import those cards into Pivotal. And again, just like every week, we would iteration planning. We would sit here and say, okay, what's the new functionality? What are the defects that are coming through that we need to prioritize and fix accordingly? So, we use it.
Yeah. So even the support people who aren't doing the development need to be in Pivotal Tracker and understand what's there, what's prioritized. Maybe if a feature is being requested or a bug is being reported, they can look at it and say, oh, that just got worked on, or that's about to be worked on. So.
Well, like I said already, and I'll keep this brief because it looks like we've got about 15 minutes to get you guys some questions here, but really, like I said, every department in Janova currently today has an Agile project. And every one of those Scrum Masters or team leads or whatever we're calling them at that time have another Scrum of Scrums where we talk about, hey, what's going on in HR? What's going on in facilities? What's happening in IT? What's happening in development? What's happening in support? And so really it is something like, as Monica said, it's the process. You can apply the process to whatever you need, just make sure it's adaptable to the area that you need it. So from an HR standpoint, it's not so much they're developing code, it's maybe policies and procedures, or a review, or a new transition to some sort of benefit program, And so it's really just the understanding, taking the philosophy itself and applying it to the project, and not necessarily getting hung up, Monica said, the details of this is how they say you should do it. Use it and apply it to the way you need to in the project.
EdgeCase as well, over the past year and a half since we first started working together, has gone through a lot of growth. I think when we first engaged, we had 12 employees total in EdgeCase. We now have 23 between our Columbus and Cincinnati office, mostly Columbus. All our projects are on Agile, but they're all different. Small to large, short-term, long-term. We have been working recently with Smule. They do some iPad, iPhone apps. We were doing some work on their web application actually for their consumers to use. We've been working with AT&T for some time on their Yellow Pages website, YP.com, plus another initiative that's not launched yet. So a great big company, right? Where they're dealing with a very big corporate culture, and yet they have a team, they have an Agile team that engages with us and is able to do so even within that giant corporation. Working with Ingersoll Rand, they have a home automation system for controlling thermostats or light switches while you're away. And that's a whole interesting, different kind of project where we have hardware integration to worry about, and running an Agile project where they're trying to manage hardware release dates that have to coordinate with software release dates. It's a big thing to manage. And other clients as well. So small to large, We run essentially the same project across all our clients.
And really what we wanted to show you is that you can apply it wherever you want to. You can take it back and you can start small, but go all the way up to, like I said, some sort of companies like AT&T.
This was just a quote that I wanted to stick in here. This was a book I read a few years ago, and something that's always stuck in my mind. Mike Cohn, who wrote the very excellent Agile Estimating and Planning, you know, it really talks about, people think about a lot of risks on the project, you know, risks of missing a date or you know, somebody leaving the team who's a critical person, but the really most critical risk is developing the wrong thing, right? So I just love the quote, though. If I were to define a failed project, one of my criteria would certainly be a project at which no one came up with any better ideas than what was on the initial list of requirements. I mean, I think that sums up Agile very well. The adaptability to say, hey, the market's changed, we need to shift our focus.
It sums up the partnership to a T. I mean, there were many times that we at least had high-level ideas of where we wanted to do this. Monica and her team would come in and say, I think you need to look at this over here. And we would take a look and say, yeah, you're right. You get it. Let's do that. And repurpose this over here. So there's something we live by with this project. So, and we'll just quickly, as kept these at the end here in case I ever got to them, but really this is what we were. This is back there. This is very code, hardware specific down to really what Janova looks like today, a very simple UI, but yet a very powerful tool. And so really, like I said, you guys can go to the website and talk to Brian for all that stuff. But I thought I'd at least show you what this team put together. I mean, it is a very powerful story, and it's a very powerful tool to show you where we came from and what we're doing with Agile and how we implement the system here. So that's it. So, well, I can all know my objectives, prices, all that stuff, but really, like we're showing up here, is just really what our plan is from adaptability, what we're trying to do. By the end of Q3, we're going to have multiple browsers running in this system. By hopefully the end of the year, we're going to be able to test desktop applications. And then hopefully in 2012, unless some mini spike here in the next 2 weeks figures out I can do this quicker, we're going to jump into the mobile market. Start testing mobile websites, mobile applications, mobile devices, things of that nature. So, yes?
I'm sorry, maybe I was back to you. Web browsers, you're saying you're going to test web browsers, or you're going to be able to test in all web browsers?
Testing in most web browsers. I'll leave it at most. I won't yet say all for it'll be challenged. But yes, we're going to start executing because, again, there are needs from clients. It's not only a system that has to execute in IE, I got to make sure it executes in Firefox or Chrome or Safari or Opera or what are the other browsers out there that they need to do. But yes, we're going to be able to execute our tests out in the cloud using multiple browsers. And that's it. So, from a question standpoint, feel free to ask away any details or anything. So.
From a technical perspective of the original product you had built that you really wanted to scale out, how much does that look like, what the final product is, and how much refactoring was involved?
Let's start with, I would say, that's a broad general statement here, the high-level concepts of the initial local-based system stuck. Everything else was gutted. We gutted everything from the beginning, from when we started it, when we started breaking these things out, the message broker and infrastructure and app servers and all that stuff. I would honestly say we probably kept nothing.
We started with a very simple framework, and then it definitely built up as we saw more need for brokering the tests that were going back.
So even the framework itself changed?
Yeah, within reason, but I think the high-level areas of what we were trying to get, the concepts of features and user stories and pages.
Or a functional perspective.
Because there's two paths. I mean, there's the application, there's the Rails application that you showed some screenshots for, and then there is the testing framework that is running in the cloud somewhere else, and workers that are pretending that they're running IE8 and running through whatever website you're trying to test. So there's a whole system of that running there, workers picking up jobs, having enough workers available to pick up jobs so you don't have a big stuck queue of tests to run, and then communicating back with the app.
In order to accommodate some of those things, absolutely. We are having conversations right now about tuning that thing up and spinning it out one more time. The benefits of how we set up this project, that it doesn't bother us. That we have to do that. We have to evolve to the shifting dynamics.
But again, exactly, the app can sit there while you change the workers, it doesn't matter, right? You have that low cost of change because it's segmented. Any other questions?
Just going back to when you were working on becoming agile, with the pair, you said you're a true pair, you do true pairing. Do you find that you still need to do code review? Or do you just use your pairing as this is our code review?
That's a great question. We tend to use the pairing as the code review because we don't have people just single head down in there. And there is some code review necessary when somebody goes off on their own. And I think there was code review between, as we were mentoring their developers, certainly there were code reviews. And we use pairing for the code review, that's correct.
Currently, we have added that to our system. We do paired programming as well, but we also have a estimate associated with the review itself, where we pass it on to another development team, and they do a peer review on that code as well to make sure that it fits into what we're doing. So.
And as you brought up, I mean, we pair almost exclusively, and we contract with our clients in a pairing arrangement. So, if you want to work with us, we say, okay, we'll schedule a pair to work on your project. So, once upon a time, we could say, well, we'll work hourly, and we'll have just this one guy do this or something, and we never do that anymore. If you work with us, you get a pair, or you get two pair if you have a big enough project, and we try to stick to that model. We believe in it very strongly. Anything else? Yep.
You mentioned that the enhancements and the defects kind of come together and you kind of look at what you work on next. Your team themselves, do they still kind of divide themselves in terms of roles? Do you want support? Do you want enhancements? Or does everyone kind of consider a developer or type of?
That's a good question. Who would call the coach?
Initially, when my team was being brought up to speed and getting more comfortable in the development role of the Rails environment, we focused them on defects to make sure that they can get more comfortable in it and not feel like they're going to eat up time associated with new feature functionality. But as it sits today, everybody is a developer at Janova. There are no support roles, there are no development definitions. Everything gets funneled in, you pick up the next card in line. It's cross-training at its best. I mean, we understand that you're going to take hits when you pick up something that you don't understand. But we have started implementing the non-assignment, the non-reassignment to keep that from happening. So,
How long did it take?
from a transition of
Getting
those,
the people to take off the support hats, but on the development hat.
When did start diving in last summer?
I would probably say, yeah, it was
It was
probably
last
post,
summer
it was
they were
probably
in support mode.
post-beta. I would say the beta got launched in June, so I would say that 3 months for us. Again, they were, hit me if I said it, they were probably the novice developers in the Ruby on Rails environment, so we had to take a lot of time in taking hits on saying, okay guys, go understand Rails, sit with this team, and really get the knowledge you need to know from that standpoint. I would say probably 2 months, probably 5-6 iterations.
That's one of the challenges we have is really getting them to step out of the roles. Embedded in waterfall, planning and support, they've been embedded in that for 10, 15 years. Get them to take their hats off and support, say I'm a developer now, so I'm responsibility.
They're just
It's been a
team,
challenge.
right? They're just team.
Yes.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I've found from trying to communicate with everybody when it comes to a team role is really show them not what has to be done, but show them about what it means to be empowered. You are this team. I'm not dictating what you need to do. You should be sitting here and telling me, I'm working on this. I'm going to get this done. I am going to help you get this where it needs to be and really move to that team empowerment.
So kind of a combination of what you just mentioned about EdgeCase going and you get a pair programmer, but then also back to tying your cases or your backlog to business value. How do you estimate hours? But I mean, when you say an iteration, you're going to develop a feature. Are you guys saying it's going to cost this much, and then we have a bucket of hours, and whatever we get to in that amount of time, or how are you guys
head.
Okay.
Certainly, if you're saying 2 points, that's maybe a day, you know, but, and that's kind of the game we play, but we keep it very strictly to points, knowing that, you know, 1 2-pointer isn't exactly the same as the other 2-pointers. So, we start with that, but I guess you can answer from the cost view.
Yeah, I mean, that has been, you know, challenging at times to understand what's going on. But, you know, again, the reason we made the shift to a software company is because all of the value we need to provide, all the dollars and all the costs, is for that. You know, whether it's divvied out from a marketing standpoint or a sales standpoint, this dollar figure here is for the group. So we look at it, you know, as a bucket of money, but also in its way that it has its sections. You know, we do inherit some of the old, you know, big business enterprise Nationwide. You know, Jeff was, you know, part of Nationwide for quite some time, and so he does bring in those. You have your P&Ls, you have your finances, you have to do all that kind of stuff. So it is the team leader's job to make sure he understands that. Ultimately, it's my job to make sure that we're staying within that conversation. And there were times we would have conversations with Mike and say, okay, we may have to hold off this iteration.
So did you guys just kind of have this general budget, like, you know, X amount of mouse to feed, and then, you know, kind of work backwards from that? Is that
Yeah, I mean that
an operating budget?
We had an operating budget of what the
Okay.
Do you have like the same set of resources supporting enhancement requests as well as break fixes, or do you have to do this?
Currently, we have the same team working on both. Our goal with our expansion and everything like that is to separate that. You know, have a team working on enhancement, fixes, moving forward with Janova 2.0 or Janova 3.0, while having a true team that can do the support of current stuff that is going on. Right now, we're still in growth mode on trying to figure out what that means and how we manage that. So as it sits today, everybody's in one team doing everything, but I believe our ultimate goal is to have support and current development in its own area and future long-term development in its own little project.
I mean, has that affected your the 2-week iterations and having a product at the end of the 2 weeks?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have had many an iteration where all of a sudden, for example, I'll take the Amazon outage. For all of you who knew about the Amazon outage about a month and a half ago, Amazon went down for about 3 days. It affected one region. That was my region. So that entire iteration, there was no functionality that was being worked on from a standpoint of getting enhancements out there. It was on call, get this thing up and running, what's the DR plan moving forward, defects, application errors, all that kind of stuff. And again, what you programmed your group to understand is it's just 2 weeks. You know, it doesn't bother us that, okay, we were looking at August 7th, it's now August 21st. And that goes all the way up the chain to Jeff as the CEO. He gets, okay, it's 2 weeks. In the grand scheme of traditional waterfall projects, that's nothing. That is nothing. So what's a day here or a day there? But absolutely, we have iterations that, while not a wash, you know, don't provide any business value because they are tied together for support and enhancements.
And something in response to both of your questions, really, as we measure velocity as shown in our Pivotal Tracker project, bugs don't get assigned any points. We can enable that in Pivotal Tracker. We did not. So, because the idea is your points are coming from your features, your business value, and bugs are not additional business value. They're things that should have been part of features that were already delivered. And so you don't get any additional points for those. But, I mean, that's going to affect your velocity. So then the question becomes, how do I gauge how much work I'm getting in 2 weeks? How do I figure out, as velocity fluctuates from iteration to iteration, because you're dealing with support issues as well as new features, you can never really come down on one exact answer on that.
Yeah, it's a science. There's no science to it. You just sort of have to feel it out and watch what's going on and be comfortable in saying, all right, we get it. This iteration.
So what did you do in that kind of a situation? Did you take the remaining work and move it to the next iteration and start it from scratch, or did you move it to a different team?
Well, the beauty of Pivotal is that it does that reassignment for you. So as we pulled in our defects and as we pulled in functionality that needed to be worked on due to some issue or things like that, it bumped the cards for you, and so you could automatically see in the system where that put releases or schedules or things of that nature. So as opposed to having you could have another team go on it, and for a few months within the Janova EdgeCase partnership, we did do that. We spawned off into two groups here. We had new future architecture being worked on and current development bug fixes being worked on. Got a little dicey out of everything, so again, we merged it back in and worked forward with it. But yeah, it does that. Pivotal does that for you.
Monica, do you have clients that are not agile? And if so, how do you handle it?
We do not have any clients that are not agile. We certainly have some more challenges with some than others. But everyone is really, and I should introduce Dan Windle here. He's with sales with EdgeCase. So he does a great job of setting expectations before we engage with a client about this is how we work, this is the process. And they usually come to us because, as Brian stated, they want that process. So there's a lot of acceptance. When you start talking about companies the size of Ingersoll Rand and AT&T, who have signed on and said we want to be agile. In fact, one of the AT&T groups came to us, one of the new initiatives. It was a different group than AT&T that we hadn't worked with before, and they said, we don't know anything about agile. We want you to teach us. So can you help us with our process and help run this? Yeah, we really would find it impossible to engage with anybody who said, I have a 1-year plan of development here, and this is what we're going to go off and do. We just don't engage that way.
Have you, did you just turn that business away?
See, I wouldn't even know that because he's walked away before I even knew their name.
Now we have worked with some clients that they were not agile and we were, and really how we did it is sort of to what they talked about is setting expectations. We explained to them behind the scenes when we're doing our work, this is how we do it. And it's an open book. We invite them to the project, we let them see how we handle it, we do that. But it's really the team leader, the scrum master's role to be involved from their methodology and their project standpoint to go to those meetings or be involved with what's going on there. But behind the scenes, when it gets to the QA group,